The murder of Jill Dando shocked the United Kingdom and left a nation searching for answers that remain elusive to this day. Talented journalist, newsreader and television presenter, Dando was known to millions as a friendly, familiar face on shows like Crime Watch, BBC Breakfast News and Holiday. On the morning of April 26, 1999, that warm presence was tragically taken from the world. Returning to her Fulham home after staying at her fiancé's house, Jill was gunned down on her doorstep in broad daylight. The killing prompted the largest murder investigation in the UK since the hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper. One man was convicted, later acquitted, and the case remains unsolved. Today we'll explore Jill's life, the day she was killed, the investigation, the theories surrounding her death, and her lasting legacy. This story blends heartbreak, mystery, and the shadow of unanswered questions. Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, where we dive deep into the unsolved, the unexplained, and the downright unbelievable. My name is James, and today we're looking at the case of Jill Dando, where a talented and popular television star was gunned down in her prime. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, and stick around to the end where I give my thoughts on what I really think happened on that day. This is the story of Jill Dando. Jill Wendy Dando was born on November 9, 1961 in Weston-super-Mare, a town in the county of Somerset in the UK. From an early age, she showed determination and resilience. Born with a heart defect, she underwent surgery at just 3 years old, yet went on to excel academically, becoming head girl at her sixth form and later studying journalism at the South Glamorgan Institute of Higher Education. Her career began in local newspapers, but Jill quickly moved to the BBC, first as a radio newsreader and then as a national television presenter. Over the years, she became one of the UK's most recognisable faces, presenting Breakfast Time, BBC 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, Holiday, Crime Watch and occasionally Songs of Praise. She won the BBC Personality of the Year award in 1997. Jill's colleagues remember her as hard-working, warm and humble, always willing to mentor others. She was also a committed Baptist and engaged in charity work, particularly during the Kosovo crisis, where she fronted appeals for refugees. By 1999, she had moved to Fulham and was engaged to gynecologist Alan Farthing, planning a wedding for later that year. Despite her high-profile career, Jill remained down to earth, connecting with audiences through her honesty, compassion and professionalism. Her life and work left a lasting impact on British journalism and television. On April 26, 1999, Jill Dando, at the time 37, left her fiancé Alan Farthing's home in Chiswick in the morning and drove to her house in Fulham to collect contract documents. Though she owned the property, she rarely visited as she was in the process of selling it. At around 11:32 a.m, as she reached her front door, tragedy then struck. Somebody grabbed her from behind, forcing her to the ground. With one hand he held her in place, and with the other he fired a single shot into her left temple. The bullet entered just above her ear and exited the right side of her head, killing her instantly. Her neighbour, Helen Doble, discovered Jill's body about 14 minutes later. Police were called at 11:47. The 999 emergency call made by Helen Doble immediately after discovering the TV presenter's lifeless body on her doorstep is a haunting and pivotal piece of evidence in the case. The call vividly captures the shock and distress of the moment, providing a real-time account of the tragic event. Hall was featured in the BBC documentary The Murder of Jill Dando, which aired on BBC 1. In this documentary, Helen Doble retraces her steps on that tragic day, offering insights into her harrowing discovery. The footage from the documentary includes the 999 call, showcasing the urgency and emotional turmoil experienced by Doble as she reported the incident to emergency services. The emergency services then arrived shortly. Jill was pronounced dead at Charing Cross Hospital shortly after 1 p.m. The attack was at once shocking and calculated at the same time. Witness Richard Hughes, living next door, reported hearing a scream but no gunshot. He saw a man, roughly 6 foot tall, walking away from the scene, the only confirmed sighting of the killer. Forensic analysis revealed the gun was a 9mm semi-automatic, likely a converted blank firing pistol, pressed hard against her head to muffle the sound. The scene raised immediate questions. Why Fulham, when Jill spent most of her time at her fiancé's home? Why leave a spent cartridge at the scene? And who could commit such a brazen murder in broad daylight? The country watched in disbelief as news of the murder spread. Jill's high-profile career, charitable work, and affable public personality made her loss deeply personal for millions around the UK. This horrifying day would set in motion the largest investigation in the UK since the Yorkshire Ripper case, spanning thousands of interviews, multiple suspects, and decades of speculation. The Metropolitan Police launched Operation Oxborough immediately after Jill's murder. The investigation was enormous, with detectives canvassing witnesses, gathering CCTV footage, and reviewing thousands of leads. Within 6 months, over 2,500 people were interviewed and more than 1,000 statements were taken. Early lines of inquiry focused on Jill's personal circle. Her agent, John Roseman, knew she was visiting Fulham that morning, but was cleared as a suspect. Ex-boyfriend Bob Wheaton also came under scrutiny, particularly regarding a £35,000 bank transfer, but he too was eliminated. Authorities quickly ruled out a professional assassin initially, citing the unusual choice of location, the use of a low-velocity converted pistol, and leaving the spent cartridge behind. Theories ranged from a stalker or obsessed fan to a contract killing linked to her work on Crime Watch. Forensic analysis confirmed the bullet was fired from a weapon modified to shoot live ammunition, but lacking rifling, making it almost certainly a converted blank pistol. Police profilers suggested the killer could be a loner with a severe personality disorder. Sightings of strange men in the area at the time were reported and investigated. A man was seen running along the street around the time of the murder, another was seen speaking to a traffic warden, and a black Jeep was caught on CCTV speeding away from the scene. Although these individuals were seen as persons of interest, the trail they left has remained cold. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to a man named Barry George, who was living near Dando's home and had a history of stalking and photographing women. Evidence recovered from his apartment, including photographs of women and a photo of him holding a similar pistol, made him prime suspect. Yet many critics argue that the case against George was circumstantial and flawed. Despite massive media coverage and extensive investigative efforts, no immediate breakthrough occurred. The case remained unsolved for over a year, frustrating the public and indeed the police. Even today, debates continue about the thoroughness of the original investigation and whether the killer exploited gaps in the investigation to evade capture. Barry George lived close to Jill Dando's Fulham home and had a history of antisocial behaviour, SA offences and obsessive tendencies. He was known for photographing hundreds of women in public, often covertly. After Jill's murder, police searched his bedsit and found thousands of photographs of women, cuttings about TV personalities, and a picture of George holding a blank firing gun, similar to the one used in Jill's murder. George was arrested on May 25th in the year 2000 and charged 3 days later. His trial began in 2001 at the Old Bailey in London. The prosecution emphasised his obsession with women and firearms, his proximity to Dando's home, and forensic evidence, including a particle of gunshot residue in his coat pocket. Witnesses also claimed to have seen him acting suspiciously in or around her street at the time. The defence countered, suggesting George was not at the scene and that Dando's murder could have been the work of a professional hitman, a Serbian operative, or another unknown assailant. They questioned the validity of the gunshot residue, pointing out potential contamination, and highlighted George's lack of direct evidence linking him to Jill. After 30 hours of jury deliberation, George was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, his conviction was quashed in 2008 after the discredited forensic evidence was excluded. His acquittal left the case unsolved and reignited debates about whether George was wrongly accused and who the true killer might be. The murder of Jill Dando remains one of the most baffling and high-profile unsolved cases in the United Kingdom. Over 20 years after her death, people continue to speculate, debate, and theorise about who killed the beloved TV presenter and why. While Barry George was convicted and later acquitted, his case is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Let's take a deep dive into the theories that have circulated over the years, from professional assassins to obsessed fans, political motives, and a random tragedy. One of the earliest theories suggests that Jill Dando's murder was politically motivated, linked to the Kosovo conflict in 1999. During Operation Allied Force, NATO bombed the radio television of Serbia headquarters in Belgrade, resulting in multiple deaths just days before Dando was killed. Some theorists propose that Dando's prominent role in a BBC appeal for Kosovar Albanian refugees may have drawn the attention of Serbian hardliners who wanted retribution for the NATO bombings. Supporting this theory are several intriguing coincidences. Just days before Dando's death, a Serbian journalist critical of the regime was assassinated outside his home in Belgrade using a method similar to the one used on Dando. Additionally, telephone calls were made to the BBC and other media outlets claiming responsibility for the killing on behalf of Serbian groups, stating it was revenge for the NATO campaign. Some investigators noted similarities in bullet casings that suggest links to Yugoslav ammunition. However, critics of this theory point out major flaws. If Dando were the target of Serbian extremists, it seems unlikely that she, a UK TV presenter, would be chosen over somebody more directly involved in NATO operations. No credible intelligence or evidence has definitively tied her murder to Serbian groups. The prosecution at Barry George's trial dismissed the idea as utter nonsense, though speculation persists among journalists and armchair sleuths. Another theory is that Jill Dando was killed on the orders of a London-based organised crime figure, sometimes referred to as Mr. Big. Investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas suggested Dando's death was intended as a message to anyone interfering with organised crime: do not cross us. This theory leans on the seemingly professional nature of the attack: a single well-aimed shot, the weapon pressed to her head to muffle the sound, and the clean escape. Some supporters suggest that Dando's work on Crime Watch could have irritated criminals as she was exposing crimes to a national audience, potentially jeopardising illicit operations. The skeptics argue that the attack was far from flawless. The spent cartridge remained at the scene, the gun was a low-velocity modified starting pistol or blank-firing weapon, and Dando was killed at her rarely used Fulham home, which would be a risky location for a professional assassin. Furthermore, her work on Crime Watch had been ongoing for years without attracting any direct threats. The idea of a stalker or obsessed fan is perhaps one of the most plausible theories when considering the crime scene and the method of the attack. Stalkers tend to act opportunistically, often without sophisticated planning, and the attack on Dando had hallmarks of an individual acting on impulse or fixation. Shortly before her death, Dando had reportedly been concerned about a man pestering her. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a man loitering near her street, both the night before and the morning of the murder. In the trial against Barry George, the prosecution leaned on this theory, stating that not everyone is rational. There is a dark, complex side to some people's minds that cause them to act in a dreadfully destructive way for no rational reason. Yet the theory has weaknesses. No famous person in the UK had been killed by a stalker before, and police investigated over 140 individuals flagged for obsessive behaviour towards Dando, eliminating them from any suspicion. Even so, the possibility of a previously unknown, highly determined stalker remains open. Barry George is the most well-known figure associated with this case. Living close to Dando's Fulham home, George had a history of antisocial behaviour, a fascination with firearms, and interest in female celebrities. Police discovered thousands of covert photos of women in his possession, and initially linked him circumstantially to the murder. George was convicted in 2001, largely on the basis of a single particle of gunshot residue found in his overcoat. However, his conviction was overturned in 2008 after the evidence was discredited. Some theorists believe George may have been involved despite the lack of definitive evidence. Others see him as a convenient scapegoat. His case demonstrates how easily circumstantial evidence can dominate a high-profile investigation, leaving the true perpetrator at large. Some have speculated that Dando's work on Crime Watch put her in the crosshairs of criminals that she had exposed. The defence in George's trial suggested that someone could have wanted to send a warning to those using media to aid police investigations. Yet law enforcement looked at every Crime Watch case Dando had presented and found no compelling reason for retaliation. Critics also argue that criminals seeking revenge would likely target the informer or the police, not a TV presenter reporting the story. Cold case reviews have suggested Dando may have been the victim of a professional high-precision killing. The technique, a gun pressed to the head, muffled sound, single shot, supports the idea of a hard contact execution. But again, the choice of location is puzzling. Dando spent most of her time at her fiancé's home, meaning her Fulham residence was not a predictable target. Investigators struggled with this contradiction, an apparently professional method paired with an unpredictable, low-traffic location. Another theory says that Dando was not the intended target. Professional or amateur killer could have mistakenly identified her as somebody else. This is largely speculative, as the attack occurred at her own front door, making mistaken identity less plausible. After the Jimmy Savile scandal emerged, some conspiracy theorists suggested that Dando may have uncovered misconduct at the BBC and was silenced. This theory is purely speculative, with no supporting evidence, but it remains a point of discussion amongst true crime enthusiasts. Finally, there's the possibility that Dando's murder was a tragic random act of violence. While rare for a public figure, it cannot be entirely ruled out. The crime scene's combination of amateurish and meticulous aspects could point to an unhinged individual acting without clear motive. Across these theories, one theme stands out. Jill Dando's murder continues to be a puzzle of contradictions. The attack was at once precise and amateurish, personal and impersonal, public yet intimate. Even after decades of investigation, no single theory fully explains why or how such a crime was committed, leaving her murder one of the most enduring mysteries in British criminal history. Okay, I'm going to run through the theories very quickly and just explain what I think happened in this case. It's a very tricky one. Evidence sort of points one way or the other. A lot of lines in the case, again, don't add up. The people that were seen leaving the scene or around the scene at the time, not much is known about them. There's the CCTV of the car, the black Jeep that was seen and never tracked down. I don't believe it was a gangland or mob-related hit. It doesn't seem like that kind of thing. A stalker or obsessed fan. This goes along with the Barry George thing as well. I think somebody of that, like that, there's no way they would have got away with it and not told someone or not given themselves away if they were that sort of disturbed in their mind. As Barry George himself was sort of a teller of tall stories, allegedly, so there was no way he would be able to keep that quiet if he had done it. I think relating to Crime Watch, possibly not. I get it's a possibility, but I think they'd have to know where she would be at that time. And if you look at the CCTV of Jill Dando during the day, there's no suggestion that she's been followed. So I think somebody knew at that time she'd have to be there. So who knew that she was there? Not going to name any names. It's all allegedly. I think this was set up. I don't think it's anything to do with sort of the Jimmy Savile thing or the BBC investigations or mistaken identity or just a random crime. I don't think that makes any sense. What I do think is somebody knew that she was going to be there. I think it was sort of a planned assassination, but the reason for it, I don't think we know, and I don't think we'll ever know. It's a very tricky one. The most plausible of the ones that, whether it being the Serbian or Yugoslav thing, again, they'd have to know that she'd be there. How would they know that when they'd have to be hanging around just waiting for her and waiting for her all this time? I do think, like I said, it is premeditated. I just don't think we will know why, and I don't think we will ever find out for this one. That's my thought on this case. As usual, it is purely speculative. It's all alleged. I don't believe anything of these as fact. Put your comments in the section below. What do you think happened to Jill Dando? Was it any of the theories that we've mentioned already, or was it something else? Let me know. Jill Dando's murder left a lasting impression on British media, law enforcement and public consciousness. Her funeral, held on May 21st, 1999 in Weston-super-Mare, was attended by friends, family, colleagues and admirers. She was buried next to her mother, and her father inherited her estate. In her memory, her fiancé, Alan Farthing, and BBC colleague Nick Ross established the Jill Dando Institute of Crime Science at University College London in 2001, raising nearly £1.5 million. The Institute focuses on innovative crime science research and remains a lasting tribute to Jill's commitment to public service and safety. The BBC also set up a bursary for aspiring broadcast journalists, and her hometown dedicated a building at Weston College to her memory. In 2023, Netflix released Who Killed Jill Dando, a 3-part documentary examining her life, death and investigation, keeping the conversation alive and ensuring that new generations learn about her story. Though the case remains unsolved, Jill Dando's legacy endures through her work, the initiatives in her name, and the ongoing fascination with one of the UK's most puzzling murders. Her life and tragic death continue to remind the public of the fragility of life and the impact one person can have on the world. Thank you for watching this episode. What do you think happened to Jill? Put your theories in the comments section, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe for more of these cases. I'll see you all next time, but until then, keep listening for the echoes.